We're now going to hear since last year, the Fondation Michaël Jean Foundation has been working to implement the action plan all over the country. And to help us learn about what the foundation has been up to, please join me in welcoming the multi-talented singer, pianist, etc., etc. Twitter addict. Peter Flegel, Director of Programs and Communications, to the front. Peter. Alongside, please come to the stage Mohamed Thiam, graphic designer and artist featured in The Fourth Wall, Make the Invisible Visible exhibition at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. The woman who woke us up this morning. Savannah Simon, original rights activist from Halifax and artist featured in Fourth Wall Justice, Art and Youth exhibition. Savannah. Pablo Munoz, winner of the Fourth Wall Youth Solidarity Challenge. And Ahmed Mohamed, director of the Breathe In Poetry Collective and 2014 Young Arts Entrepreneur. Please welcome Mohamed.
Thank you, Tom and Barbara. Peut-être, je pourrais commencer avec la question de la...
Maybe I'm going to start with the issue of diversity and social inclusion, which we discussed during the last forum. It was a very important issue for the participants in all the workshops. It was a feature of our action plan. The participants affirmed that the arts and culture has a primary role to play to favor communities which respect diversity, see it not as a threat, but really a source of richness. And that's why the foundation launched its program, The Fourth Wall, Making the Invisible Visible, at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts on February 5th this year during Black History Month. This was a concrete response to the recommendations that were in the action plan in terms of diversity. Mohamed Thiam, you are a young Montreal graphic artist. You were at the heart of the initiative. Could you maybe speak to us a little bit about this project? The interpreter apologizes, the mic is really not working. We're going to need to do something else. On the occasion of the first edition of The Fourth Wall, which was last February, the Michaël Jean Foundation had launched a contest in Montreal where artists were presenting their work. And after careful consideration, we had a wonderful opportunity to work with the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, especially with the Canadian and Quebec collection, to choose a work with which we would enter into dialogue, actually. So our new work of art, this new work of art was in dialogue with this Montreal Museum of Fine Arts work of art. And this was a lovely initiative because in spite of the fact that we're all connected to each other with Twitter and all other social media, with internet and everything, I still have the impression that we've never been as far as separate from each other. Most of the things that we know about other people, about our neighbors, even regionally, nationally, or through or abroad, is done through the media. A lot of people don't know the names of their neighbors. They don't know the children of their friends, etc. And so for me, this kind of a projects like The Fourth Wall or like the National Forum on the Power of the Arts, brings people together to really refresh their memories, to remind them of the importance of learning from others, of sharing things with others in the best way possible, without prejudice, without stereotypes, without this baggage that we all carry with us, which is often not necessarily based in fact. And so it was a wonderful opportunity, and I had the chance to participate in this. So you're talking about communicating, about the importance of communication. Let's speak about your work, the work that you created, that we can see on the screen here. We see some anger, maybe even a desire to speak, to make your own point of view heard. Already at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, It was the first time that contemporary artists from a cultural minority had a contemporary exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts. That's not normal. We're not in 2014 in Canada. There have been diverse communities for centuries, or even local communities that were there before us in Montreal. So there has to be more opening in this regard, more opportunity for this kind of dialogue. And it shouldn't just be at specific moments such as Black History Month or Women's Month or Day. Things have to be implemented this way and generally throughout society, because it allows us to have conversations, dialogue. It creates a safe environment to have, a bit like AA meetings, where people are able to ask questions, to talk about their fears, their desires, of everything that might concern them about the other without feeling judged. We often work based on stereotypes, and this helps us see how we perceive things. Often many of the words that we use to describe ourselves put us in little boxes. We have this habit of always categorizing things, be it physical appearance, everything. We have this reflex. As soon as we see someone, we say, okay, first reaction, we start and judge the positive, the negative, the for, against, and we make decisions based on that. But the problem is that if our categories or our indicators are biased, then it implies a judgment. So it's very good to have the humility of understanding that we don't always know everything, and we need to have the courage to ask questions and to come closer to people, to not be afraid, and to have an encounter, because it's with these true encounters that we can develop this multicultural identity, this multicultural knowledge. So my work is often based on this topic, to try and engage in conversations related to stereotypes and prejudice and the way in which we perceive things. Why do we perceive things in a certain way? What influences us to perceive things in this way? So you talked about the importance of creating safe spaces, and also the importance of breaking down the stereotypes. And so according to you, culture and the arts have an important role to play in this regard. Yes, the arts and culture have always had this role. If we go really far back into time, if we think about Nazi Germany or any war situation, the first thing that happens before the war, it's propaganda that's actually communicated through the arts, through caricatures in cartoons, in movies, in newspapers, through other means, and it starts to turn the enemy into a villain.
Donc, on montre des points spécifiques que l'on essaye d'intégrer dans la société comme des repères.
We show specific aspects that we try and integrate in society, how you can recognize someone who belongs to a certain group through which characteristics. That's always the first step to the war. And there's also film that comes into play. This shows the importance of these media. So the arts have always had this power. And if we look into the past through archaeology, paleontology, it's always through art that we can learn much about our past, our own past. That's why I use this medium, in order to try and speak about topics it's not that they're not discussed, these topics, but even people who do discuss these topics, so if we talk about Black artists, for example, maybe they're not presenting things that are important for me. We don't have the same experience, the same past, we don't have the same baggage. So it's important to speak for oneself, to speak about different experiences in order to contribute to this conversation.
Very fascinating perspective on the power of the arts. Thank you. And I think one of the things that your perspective reminds us is the importance of cultural institutions as spaces where we can have those kind of dialogues, those that bring forth the importance and the power of the arts to break down silos. And so last year at the forum, participants also spoke obviously quite strongly about the role of cultural institutions and to be integrated fully within their communities. And so based on the recommendations in the action plan, the Michaël Jean Foundation decided then to partner with the Art Gallery of Ontario and Pride Toronto to launch a special Fourth Wall exhibition to coincide with World Pride 2014, which took place in June of this year. The focus was really on solidarity with Canada's LGBTQ communities and Two-Spirited peoples, and mobilize a coalition of over 60 faith-based human rights, health, cultural, and justice organizations across the country who really came together to show support to Canada's LGBTQ youth. Pablo Munoz, you were in fact the winner of the Fourth Wall Youth Solidarity Project Challenge, and so perhaps you can tell us a bit about the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the way that I came into the project was with a call for submissions across Canada, and I created this piece particularly for the project. And then I guess closer to June, I found out that the piece had been selected as part of 6 finalists, and that we were going to Toronto to talk about solidarity with LGBTQI and Two-Spirited people, young people in Toronto, which I thought was fantastic. I thought, just to get the chance to go and have this conversation was brilliant. And then in Toronto, I found out that the piece was the winner and that it was being turned into this mural that you see now on the screen there. Yeah, and then so after that we began the work with the FDO on turning this piece into the mural that's there now.
It's a beautiful and very powerful piece. I like there's the image of the barbed wire, these two men, separated but yet communicating, perhaps even kissing. Can you tell us what you were trying to convey?
Yeah, so as for World Pride, we were celebrating the achievement of the gay rights, the queer rights movement in Canada, and a lot of our generation is now inheriting this movement, this sexual liberation movement, and we're starting to say what it means to us and put in what we need to say on this subject. And I feel, when we talk about how far the movement has come, we often forget that it is, we have gained rights mostly for men, mostly for white and middle class men, and we often forget about, we don't really talk about, say, the trans missing and murdered woman in the Highway of Tears, and we rarely talk about the queer refugees that are currently being imprisoned in Canada for exercising the right of seeking refuge. So I wanted to, as a queer refugee myself, I wanted to put this forward, and I created this piece. But instead of looking at it from kind of like a deficit, I wanted to show how we show strength at the imminent oppression of the border. And I think love is strength, and I think love is resilient. And so I decided to put these two men kissing in front of, or through the border, breaking down the walls that kind of exist between us. Yeah.
So have you had any feedback about the message that you're trying to convey?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's been so great. You know, having this piece be at the AGO, which is, you know, a well-recognized institution that celebrates art, has put this piece kind of at a different level. And I've gotten emails and I've gotten just messages from people all across North America, all across Turtle Island saying, you know, I got activists in Chicago calling me up and saying, hey, I love this piece, can we use it for a campaign? I got people in Santana, California, who I later went on to create another piece, people who were advocating for the rights of trans people being in prison in the wrong gendered jails. So, you know, through social media and through just this platform of putting it up at the AGO with, you know, in collaboration with the Michael John Foundation, I've been able to create a much larger conversation.
So I think, and what's significant about you just as an individual is that you're an artist, or perhaps you're an artivist. You're an activist, very engaged, not only throughout Canada, but also in Latin America. So what message would you have for, I guess, social activists that are not too familiar about the power and the utility of the arts?
I feel like, I mean, all activists know the power of the arts. Art is not a separate entity from social change. It's a living entity within social change. And I've never heard about a social rights or a rights movement that doesn't include art in some way. It is kind of like, it's a knee-jerk reaction to use art to document our stories and to propel the movement forward. In terms of a message that I have for like other activists is, I guess, I mean, it's kind of funny being in that kind of spot. But, you know, I did not work alone. I didn't come up with this by myself. This is part of my community. This is part of the community that has been raising me and that has been educating me and that has been shaping the way that I think. And without that, I wouldn't have anything. There were, from what I heard, there were 2,000 votes for this piece, which, as my boyfriend said, that's more than just your cousins, right? I think if you tie into what your community is saying and you convey what your community is trying to say, and you act as a vehicle for that, you will build onto that movement. I guess that's what I want to say.
Well, thank you, Pablo. Thank you. And so your point about the inextricable relationship between the arts and social activism brings us to the next, I guess, the theme and series of recommendations in the action plan, which focused on access to justice and public safety. Participants last year spoke about the ways in which the arts should be used to promote social justice, to prevent violence against women, and also to put an end to the prison and community to prison pipelines through asset-based training. Savannah Simon, you are very active in the Maritimes, and you were part of the project that the Michael Jean Foundation worked with the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. Some of you, if you turn around, perhaps you'll see our little poster, or our big poster at the top over there. That was the poster of the project that we collaborated with the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia called Justice, Art, and Youth, which was really focusing on giving youth throughout Nova Scotia and across the country a voice to address issues of social justice, incarceration, reconciliation. And so, Savannah, you were one of the lucky ones to have your artwork featured in the exhibition. Perhaps you can talk about the project.
So the art piece is now located at the Nova Scotia Art Gallery in Halifax, and it's out of all the different things that I'm into, you can see it up there right now. This piece was probably one of the most challenging and most emotional pieces that I've ever worked on, and I almost didn't submit it. And I was so close, like my computer was crashing and the time was running out, and I was so nervous. And I'm not really the type to get nervous. I kind of like got over that phase. But this piece was it's very dear to my heart, and the piece is to honor the Indian residential school survivors. And my grandmother, Sarah Simon, she's 89. She's feeling fine. She's still alive. And she was a survivor. And so her picture is on there. And as you can see, the 4 colors are represented. The 4 colors are really significant in our native culture all across Turtle Island meaning North America. So there's the red, the yellow, the black, and the white. Those little around, looks like a sun, and those are like kind of the rays. Those are tiles, and they're white, and they also have images of the survivors who have survived from the Indian residential school. And the images are in black and white, and most of the images are from when they were younger. So this piece had a lot of involvement and a lot of, research and interviews and visiting and hearing stories. And this piece is kind of like how growing up I would listen to my grandmother share her stories about what happened to her when she was at Indian residential school. And then, as a teen, I would listen to other elders and go visiting. And whenever I'd visit my friends, I'd always listen to the elders. What are they saying? And sometimes they would share, and sometimes they wouldn't. And just hearing their stories, it's incredible, to.
Yes, it is quite incredible. It's actually, I think the survivors have been waging a struggle for many years to get the story out, and many, and facing a lot of closed doors. I think thanks to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they received quite a lot of a boost to have an opportunity to share their stories. And I can understand that there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of sadness, because the legacy is still alive. Perhaps you can tell us about, perhaps either in your family or in your friends, how this legacy still manifests itself today.
So being, I guess I'm a second generation from an Indian residential school survivor, and being like a part of that, it does have an effect on me, even though I didn't go through what my grandmother went through. And I guess growing up, I didn't realize how much it affected me. I didn't realize that until I took this program. I was very blessed to take this, it's called Tapway Warrior Program. And I got to take, it was like a 3-week intensive program, and it had a big focus on Indian residential schools and the multi-genial effects. And so we had to do a family tree, and we had to talk about, where is there sexual abuse in our families? Where is there alcoholism, physical abuse? And so those are things that we don't often talk about on a daily or to just anybody. And so, having to dig really deep and to look at my whole family. My grandmother, Sarah Simon, she's 89, and she got the language, the native language, the Mi'kmaq language beaten out of her, physically beaten. And so when she got out of Indian residential school, she fell in love with my grandfather, and he helped her to relearn the language. And so, because the language was stolen and the culture was raped from my people, this is why I do what I do. This is why I step forward. This is why I share my culture, because they couldn't. And because still to this day, some of them died to their grave, never speaking their language again, never holding an eagle feather, never doing the round dance, because they were beaten and they were told that that is the devil if you do that. And that is evil if you practice your culture. And that language is the devil's language. It is not. That's the language of this land. Mi'kmaq should be. I have a friend who's right now dying of cancer, and he's an Indian residential school survivor, and his picture's on there. And I hold his teachings really dear to my heart, because he told me something recently when I went to go visit him. He said that anger that we hold inside of us, those pains, those dark secrets, all those darkness inside of us, don't suppress it. You have to release it. Get therapy, get help, but don't carry that weight. Shift that weight where it belongs. If somebody's hurt you, or if somebody's done something to you and you never told anybody, make sure you shift that weight to where it belongs, and pray, give it to Creator, go to therapy, whatever. He said, let it come out of you, because that's only weighing you down. That's going to weigh your spirit down. And oh my God, his stories are so horrifying. His stories are just, they make you want to throw up. They're so sick as to what happened to him when he was in Indian residential school. But I'm so grateful that he's so honest about it now. On his deathbed now, he's talking. And he said that so many of his friends have died never speaking about what happened to them, and that now he gets this chance. And he said, he always told himself as a young kid, he said, I'm probably going to die of cancer. And now he's on his deathbed with cancer. And he said, what you say to yourself, you have to be very careful. You tell yourself good things. You give yourself positive self-talk, because whatever you will say, you will manifest. So that really spoke volumes. I was really, it really took me back, because sometimes, as positive as I am, as motivating I can talk and everything, that little devil or the little enemy or whatever you want to call it on your shoulder will sometimes try to creep in, or what other people say bad about you will try to creep in, but we can't let that, because that is toxic and that will kill us. So just remember, if I can help you to bring anything to better your day or your life, just remember his teaching is that talk good to yourself and be kind to yourself and make sure that you love yourself, most importantly.
Thank you. Very powerful and moving words. And thank you also for sharing such a powerful and tough testimony, because as we can sense, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of suffering that's associated with it. So it can be often quite difficult to share the story. But by standing up and sharing with us your artwork, you're showing that it's possible to stand up, to speak out. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. I just have one more small thing to share. While my grandmother was in Indian residential school and all the others who were there, for 10 years my grandma was there, and she couldn't get one hug. She couldn't get one hug. Just let that soak in for a minute. No hug, no holding hands, none of that affection, that love. So for all those years that our grandparents lost out on love, the scars that is in their hearts, this is why I bring my free hug sign to the power of the arts. So you guys can come at me and get hugs anytime. This is why I hug, because they couldn't for all those years. All in.
And you're an entrepreneur, right?
Free hugs.
Free hugs. Thank you. So I know you're an entrepreneur, and I think most of the artists up here are also entrepreneurs, which brings us to the next point in the action plan, which focused on economic development, social enterprise, and entrepreneurship. So Ahmed Mohammed, if I'm pronouncing it properly, otherwise known as Nomadic, correct? So you've been quite active in Edmonton, in Alberta, with a really interesting project, and as part of the Young Arts Entrepreneur program with the Michaël Jean Foundation, you were selected to be part of the program, so to receive some funds to start your business, and also to receive business mentors to help you with the process. So perhaps you can tell us about what you've been doing in this project and about your new business.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say thank you. Amanda came up here last night and she said success is relative, right? And I just want to say, Mom, I made it. This is my success. Being amongst you guys and sharing, being born in Somalia and growing up in a hut, and then traveling to Italy for the country of our colonizers, and then coming to Canada and learning English as my third language. The fact that I'm here presenting something is an honor. I want to say thank you to the Michaël Jean Foundation and everybody involved. I'm extremely honored. Thank you very much. The Breath in Poetry Collective started out as a group of enthusiasts. It was myself and a Nigerian-born woman named Titi Lopez Shinuga, who's very active in Edmonton and in Canada, and now in Nigeria. What happened was, in our community, we felt there was a disparity between the professional and amateur artists, and especially the minorities in our community. We felt that we never had the access to become professionals. I've always been trying to become an actor, and I've always found that it's not necessarily just what you know, it's who you know. And I found out that it's very difficult to get paid and become a professional if nobody's providing you that avenue. So I said to myself, how can I change that for anybody coming after me? Because I struggled, I don't want everybody else to struggle the same thing. So the Breath in Poetry was founded on that basis, that we want to provide opportunity for any type of artist. It starts out as poetry because the idea is we breathe in experience and we exhale poetry. So all the time, every day, we're reciting poetry, whether it's through your visual art, whether it's through piano, whether it's through gospel, we're doing art. So poetry is the foundation of all art, is what we believe. And so the Breath in Poetry now, we go in throughout all communities, we try to connect communities and organizations together. For instance, the LGBT community and the Somali community, there's a lot of stigma in the Somali community when it comes to this. So I brought that together and to open up the talk because it's very important to have that. And I found out that although we speak many different languages, we forgot the most important language, which is art. That translates through any language, regardless of what the language is. As long as you're an artist, you can communicate something. So the objective was to bring all these different communities and have them communicate through art. So the minorities would come, everybody that's a young rapper or a young poet, I'd bring them to the Edmonton Poetry Festival, which is the people that are literary, and I'd have them get their stuff published. So it's just an opportunity to foster growth in the community, not to exclude anybody because of their background.
And how effective is it bringing those people?
It's been fantastic. Like I mentioned just a second ago, how I said it's not necessarily just what you know, who you know. I just want to say thank you to you guys, and I don't. It's so hard to explain something, right? And I'm not one to brag a lot, but what the Michaël Jean Foundation has done for me is that name, right? Before the Michaël Jean Foundation, I was succeeding. I won a Canadian championship for poetry. I've won several awards. I was an artist in residence in Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute in Seattle. But as soon as you guys provided me that opportunity to get recognized as a young entrepreneur and you wanted to reward me, everything changed. Now I'm part of the Edmonton Arts Council. I'm being recognized throughout Canada, and my involvement is respected. So now I'm not just an African minority trying to make it into the professional sphere. I am looked at as a professional who brings community together. And there's been a lot of successes. Now youth poets are getting their work published. We have rappers that are matter of fact, just this is a cool story. Before I came here on Wednesday, we collaborated with the Art Gallery of Alberta, and it was for poetry. And the cool thing was when we first got there, I wanted to collaborate with them, and when we got there, they only had 5 seats. I said, you're going to need a lot more seats than 5 seats, because they didn't understand the power of art and poetry brings. And I find it ironic because it's the art gallery. So I said, you're going to need more seats. They brought 5 more seats. I said, you know what? My dad would always say the best way to explain something to somebody is through demonstration. So I kept my mouth quiet. Every 10 minutes, they had to bring 20 more chairs. By the time the night was over, we had a total of 150 people to come and watch poetry from ages of like literally 4 all the way up to 80. And it was fantastic.
That's an incredible story. So from your perspective, just to go back to the idea of bringing people together, so the arts and business together can have a social impact.
Definitely. The one thing that artists lack, what I really, really mostly enjoyed about the award that I received and the funding that I received was the mentorship. Because growing up, I never had the experience of how to be an artist. Like I'd like to say that I'm talented in doing poetry, but I don't have the talent in being a business, or how to write a resume, or how to get myself heard in the sense. So what that does is the business, now that I've learned that, I pass that on. Now I have a professional portfolio that I can distribute. For instance, when I was going to Seattle and they just thought I was coming over to do poetry in the Somali community, I sent my resume forward. They're like, oh my God, we never knew you were like this. Please, would you like to be an artist in residence? So it's that piece of paper and the information behind the business side that really benefited me, and the mentors continue to educate me, and I can pass that on to my community. So now that we can be sustainable performers and sustainable business artists and have that mentality behind.
So in other words, you were mentored, and now you're mentoring.
Exactly. I believe this greatly. I've always said, an artist's soil is their community. If they're not growing, they're in the wrong field. And my duty is every piece of knowledge that I get, I'm going to pass it forward, because as human beings, we are symbiotic. We need each other. There's no such thing as I made it by myself. So these things need to become recognized, and that's why I'm very grateful to the foundations, because you guys done something like the Fourth Wall. People are hearing about it in Chicago. That's instrumental. That's huge success. To be able to communicate something through borders that we create ourselves, it's very instrumental. So yeah, I'm getting mentored, but every piece of knowledge I get, I pass it forward, because their growth is my growth, my community.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed.